Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. After more than a year of negotiations, Turkey is set to back Sweden's bid to join NATO. The alliance's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has agreed to forward Sweden's accession to Parliament. He added that Sweden would also actively support efforts to revitalize Turkey's EU accession process.
President Erdogan has agreed to forward the accession protocol for Sweden to the Grand National Assembly as soon as possible and work closely with the Assembly to ensure ratification. Sweden's cooperation with Turkey in the fight against terrorism will continue beyond accession.
After Russia launched its attack on Ukraine back in 2022, Sweden and Finland both abandoned decades of neutrality and applied to join NATO. But expanding the alliance requires the approval of every member. Turkey initially voiced opposition to the Nordic countries' bids, citing their failure to crack down on terror groups. Finland eventually joined the alliance back in April after winning Ankara's support. After a trilateral meeting in Vilnius, Sweden says it will set up a bilateral security mechanism with Turkey to tackle terror threats. Erdogan's support came on the eve of a major NATO summit, which is taking place in Lithuania. And to discuss the green light to Sweden's NATO bid, joining me now from Ankara is Murat Yesiltas. She is the Director of Foreign Policy Research at the SETA Foundation. And from Liepāja, Latvia, Gregory Simons. He is an associate professor at Turiba University. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Gregory, Turkish President Erdogan, after a year of negotiations, has said Turkey has agreed to forward Sweden's ratification to the Turkish Grand National Assembly. Were you expecting such a move by Turkey, and has this come to you as a surprise?
I was not expecting this move already. I would have expected that it would have taken a bit longer because Turkey held the high ground. Sweden had something that they needed and wanted politically from Turkey, and therefore was in a position to extract different concessions. So perhaps the timing of the summit in Vilnius was an occasion which those concessions could be extracted, I assume. So what's going on behind closed doors?
So Murat, how about you? Are you surprised? And what kind of guarantees you think NATO and Sweden could have given Turkey in return for backing its accession to the alliance?
It seems that it was a surprise for at least a researcher and experts. I think, when you look at President Erdogan press meeting before he left from Turkey, he, strongly emphasized that Turkey should become a European Union member. It was I think, a tactical move to facilitate the negotiation process. But the meeting was very important. I thought that the meeting between Turkey and Sweden was really important to discuss the further collaboration and to overcome Turkey's security concern, which are emanated from the PKK. And this, I think, is a surprise in nature, but in terms of thinking about the nature of international politics and the tactics that Turkey are using in its negotiation, it was not a surprise.
So, Gregory, Ankara and Stockholm have also agreed on creating a new bilateral security compact, and Sweden will present a roadmap for its continued fight against terrorism. I mean, how is that going to play out, and do we know what it's comprised of?
I do not know what it's comprised of. I suppose there are going to be some sensitive issues that neither Sweden and perhaps Turkey would want to emphasize publicly. But once more, I would have doubts because there are some contradictions between, if we want to put it this way, Sweden's so-called humanitarian policy that is harboring former PKK members and Turkey's seeking of security by having those former PKK members extradited. So you've got a lot of domestic politics which affects both countries, I think, and there are some things which are going to be problematic to find a common ground on. And I would also say that if we look at the negotiations to date, Sweden has had a rather bad track record of keeping its word on the agreements which have been made to date.
So, Murat, I mean, does that mean Sweden has already fulfilled its commitments to Turkey? And are we likely to see, for example, Sweden lifting its arms embargoes imposed on Turkey? And eventually, how will that impact Ankara's fight against terrorism?
I think, when you look at the paper or the agreements between Sweden and Turkey, Sweden has been, changing its legislative, anti-terrorism legislative, and in terms of the, lifting the arms embargo against Turkey, Sweden, I think, promised to lift the embargo. We are, I think, at this stage, this is important. And when we look at the promises of Sweden concerning Turkey's security concern, we have to see how Sweden will treat the PKK's activities in Sweden. I think this is important, especially before the ratification of Sweden's membership to NATO by Turkish Parliament. So, and on the other hand, I think Sweden's arms embargo against Turkey was not strategically important, especially in Turkey's fights against terrorism. So the transaction between Turkey and Sweden was low. And secondly, when we look at the different military equipment, Sweden has not been giving Turkey a critical and strategic platform, military platform. And
Yes.
Turkey's own defense industry is really important in the fight against terrorism. So therefore, I do not think that Sweden's lifting embargo against Turkey will strategically shape Turkey's ongoing fight against terrorism.
So, Gregory, what do you think? Is this a win on Turkey's side? And what kind of political and economic ramifications are we likely to see in Turkey's relations both with NATO and the European Union?
Well, I think Turkey has played the game quite well. It's been a good card game, so to speak, because, I mean, the cards have been held by Turkey because Sweden needed something for its political policy. Now, I mean, how will it shape relations with Sweden, EU, so forth? I'm not quite sure because things haven't played out fully yet because things are still under negotiation, and it can go either way. I would be surprised if there is any movement on EU membership, for example, because this is a hot issue in the European Union among the member states, and some member states openly oppose it. So this is a problem. With Sweden and Turkey, I think the main sticking point is going to be those members of the PKK who are have sought political asylum in Sweden. They will not be given up because in terms of domestic politics, that would be an extremely unpopular thing for any sitting Swedish government to do. So it's a lot wait and watch this space.
So we can say not everything has been sorted out so far. But Murat, could this decision by Turkey serve as an icebreaker in Ankara-Washington ties? And how will Turkey's approval of Sweden's bid impact the long-awaited sale of F-16s to Turkey by the US?
I think it is really important and it's very significant in terms of re-energizing the relationship between Turkey and Washington, Turkey and United States. But it will not only depend on Turkey's decision to support Sweden's membership to NATO, because there are, many other issues which, makes bilateral relations between two countries is a more complex. So when we look at the, YPG PKK problem, it is strategically important for Turkey, and United States is still continuing to support YPG in Syria, and YPG now is transforming its military strength in Syria, which will ultimately pose a strategic challenge, security challenge against Turkey. So when it comes to the economic relations, yes, there is an good atmosphere in both capitals, which they will of course improve their economic relations. So when it comes to the F-16, yes, this is an icebreaker development in terms of supporting
Yes.
Turkey's F-16 procurement, but there is still problems, especially about Congress approach and some of the members of Congress approach towards Turkey.
Yes.
So therefore, yes, it's significantly important to recalibrate the relationship, but it still needs time to improve and deepening relationship between two countries.
So, Gregory, what do you think? Does President Biden have now a stronger hand in convincing the Congress to press ahead with the sale of fighter jets? And some argue if the U.S. sold these fighter jets to Turkey, that paves the way for Greece to acquire F-35s. So what is your take on that? And if this happens, is this going to create more rifts between the two neighbors as well as two NATO allies, Turkey and Greece?
Sure. I mean, you've got a cascade effect. So when one thing happens, others stem from it. Yeah. I mean, if we look at this negotiation between Sweden and Turkey over NATO, but with the EU, this is not about Sweden, Turkey, and the EU. This is about Turkey and the US indirectly. So this is the main point, because once one thing happens, others can happen. As you say, yes. If it comes to the F-16s being okayed, because this has been blocked, then of course Greece has some leverage, because then they say, well, okay, you sold F-16s, we want this, and if you don't, we will cause trouble in NATO, etc. So that creates that problem. But I think one of the problems for Turkey, I mean, Turkey's got this unique situation currently in this volatile geopolitical situation where it has carved itself out an independent position as a subject of international relations. If it gets too close to the US, it can become an object of these, and this will be extremely dangerous for Turkey, as mentioned by Murat. I mean, US policy with YPG, etc., has not changed. And Turkey would be in a less advantageous position to press its foreign and security policy
yes.
and goals.
We'll see how the US will kind of, put a balancing act between the two countries, I think, in the very near future. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.